We'd lived in our house for about 8 years in a rural neighborhood in Arizona. We got along fine with all our neighbors. No problems, no drama, just friendly waves and the occasional barbecue. Then about a year ago, this guy from California bought the empty lot next to us. And within a week of moving in, he threw an absolute fit about the stuff we had near the property line. We had put a single fence post roughly where we thought the property line was. It was supposed to be temporary, but ended up staying there. We also had a couple of vehicles parked near that marker. Nothing crazy, just normal stuff. This guy was absolutely livid that the very tip of one of our cars was supposedly touching his property, maybe a few inches over the line. He threatened to have our vehicle towed, said we were trespassing on his land. So we did what he should have done before buying the property. We hired a professional surveyor to mark the actual legal property line. Turns out the real property line was 20 feet into what he thought was his property. 20 feet. He'd been screaming at us about a few inches, and now he'd just lost 20 feet of his yard. We're currently building an ugly fence right on that newly surveyed line. Let me tell you the whole story. Let me give you some context about our property and neighborhood. My wife and I bought our house about 8 years ago. It's in a rural area outside Phoenix, Arizona. The lots are pretty big, about an acre each. Lots of space between houses. Desert landscape, cacti, mountains in the distance. It's beautiful. The lot next to ours had been empty the entire time we'd lived there. Just desert land. The owner lived out of state and was just holding on to it as an investment or something. We'd tried to buy it from him a few times, but he wasn't interested in selling. When we first moved in, there were no clear property markers, no fence, no survey stakes. Nothing. We kind of just guessed where the property line was based on where our house sat and where neighboring properties seemed to be. About 3 years into living there, we decided to park some vehicles on the side of our property. We have a small RV, a truck, and an old car we're restoring. Nothing junky, just vehicles we use occasionally. We didn't want them in our driveway taking up space, so we parked them along the side yard, near where we thought the property line was. To mark roughly where we thought the line was, I put in a single fence post. Just one post, nothing fancy. I was planning to eventually put up a proper fence, but it was low priority. That single post ended up staying there for years. Nobody complained. The lot next door was empty. Our other neighbors were far enough away that they couldn't even see our vehicles. Life was peaceful. Then last year, the lot sold. We found out the lot next door had sold when we saw a sold sign go up. We were actually excited. It would be nice to have neighbors. Maybe someone with kids our kids could play with. Maybe someone who'd actually build a house and improve the area. The new owner showed up about a week after closing. Guy in his 50s driving a brand new Tesla, California plates. Let's call him Derek. My wife and I went over to introduce ourselves. Standard neighborly thing to do. We brought over some cookies, welcomed him to Arizona, offered to help if he needed anything. Derek was polite but cold. He thanked us for the cookies, said he was planning to build his dream home here, and that was about it. No small talk, no friendliness, just very businesslike. We figured maybe he was just busy or stressed about the move. We went home and didn't think much of it. 2 days later, Derek knocked on our door. And he was angry. He said, "We need to talk about your vehicles." I said, "Okay, what about them?" He said, "They're on my property. The fence post you put up is on my property. Everything on that side is mine, and you're trespassing." I was confused. I said, "The fence post is right where we think the property line is. We've had it there for years." He said, "Well, you're wrong. I had my real estate agent check, and everything past your driveway is my land. You need to move your vehicles immediately or I'm calling a tow truck." Now, I'm a pretty calm guy. I don't like confrontation, but this rubbed me the wrong way. He'd been here for 2 days and was already threatening to tow our vehicles? I said, "Look, we've been here 8 years. We've had those vehicles parked there for 5 years. Nobody's ever complained. Are you sure about the property line?" He said, "I'm 100% sure. Move them by tomorrow or I'm making calls." And he walked away. The next day, Derek came back. This time with a tape measure. He marched onto what he claimed was his property and started measuring. He took pictures of our vehicles. He took pictures of the fence post. He was documenting everything like he was building a legal case. I went outside and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Documenting your trespassing. These vehicles are 6 inches onto my property. That fence post is a foot onto my property. This is unacceptable. 6 inches. He was losing his mind over 6 inches. I said, "Have you actually had the property surveyed? Do you have documentation showing where the line is?" He said, "I don't need a survey." It's obvious where the line is. Your driveway ends, my property begins. That's not how property lines work. But trying to explain that to Derek was pointless. Over the next week, he came over 3 more times, each time more aggressive. He threatened to call the police. He threatened to sue us. He said he was going to have our vehicles towed at our expense. My wife was getting stressed about it. Our kids were asking why the neighbor was always yelling. It was affecting our peace of mind in our own home. Finally, after the 5th confrontation, I'd had enough. I said, "Derek, if you're so sure about the property line, let's settle this officially. Let's hire a professional surveyor. We'll split the cost 50-50. That way we'll know exactly where the line is and this can be done." He said, "I'm not paying for a survey. I already know where the line is. You're the one trespassing, you pay for it." I said, "Fine, I'll pay for the survey myself. But when it proves you're wrong, I expect an apology." He laughed. Actually laughed at me. He said, "Good luck with that. You're about to waste your money." And he walked away. That's when I decided to hire the surveyor. Not because I thought I was wrong, but because I wanted official documentation. And honestly, I was starting to suspect Derek had no idea what he was talking about. I found a licensed surveyor who could come out within a few days. Professional guy, been doing surveys in Arizona for 20 years. Let's call him Tom. Tom showed up with all his equipment. GPS units, measuring tools, the works. He explained that he'd be checking the county records, finding the original survey markers if they still existed, and establishing the exact legal property line. He said the process would take most of the day. I told him to take all the time he needed. I wanted this done right. Derek saw the surveyor working and came over. He was smirking, confident. He said to me, "This is going to be embarrassing for you." I didn't say anything. Just let Tom do his work. Tom spent hours out there. He was using GPS equipment, checking measurements, hammering in stakes. He'd walk back and forth between our property and Derek's, checking and rechecking everything. Around noon, Tom came to my door. He had this look on his face. Not quite a smile, but something close. He said, "You're going to want to see this." I went outside. Derek saw us talking and came over too. Tom pulled out a map. He pointed to where Derek's property actually started. 20 feet past where Derek thought it started. The fence post I'd put up years ago? That was actually 15 feet onto my property. The vehicles Derek was complaining about? All on my land, every single one. In fact, Derek's property line was so far over that part of where he'd been standing when he was yelling at me was technically still my property. I just stood there processing this. 20 feet. That's a massive difference. Tom hammered in official survey stakes marking the real property line. Big obvious stakes with tape. There was no ambiguity now. Derek's face went through several emotions. Confusion, disbelief, anger, and finally, horror. Derek stood there staring at the survey stakes for a solid minute without saying anything. Finally, he said, "This can't be right." Tom pulled out the legal documents. "This is based on the county records and the original survey from when these lots were platted. This is the legal property line. If you'd like to contest it, you can hire your own surveyor, but I guarantee they'll come to the same conclusion." Derek said, "But I was told," my real estate agent said. Tom shrugged. "Your real estate agent was wrong. This is the official line." Derek turned to me, and I waited for an apology, for some acknowledgement that he'd been harassing us for weeks over nothing. Instead, he said, "This doesn't change anything. I still want your vehicles moved." I laughed. I couldn't help it. I said, "Derek, my vehicles are 20 feet onto my property. I'm not moving anything. In fact, I'm going to put up a fence. Right here on this line, and you're going to have to deal with it." He said, "You can't put up a fence. That'll look terrible." I said, "I can put up whatever I want on my property. You spent weeks telling me how important property lines are. Well, now we know where the line is, and I'm marking it." He tried to argue more, but Tom interrupted. "Sir, he's within his rights. This is his property. You don't have any say in what he does on his side of the line." Derek stormed off without another word. Over the next few days, I did some research. Turns out Derek's plans for his dream home had been based on the incorrect property line. He'd been planning to build right up to where he thought the boundary was. Now, with 20 feet less property, his plans didn't work anymore. He'd have to completely redesign everything, and it was going to cost him a fortune. My wife and I talked about what to do next. We could have been nice about it. Could have just left things as they were, not put up a fence, let Derek pretend those 20 feet were still his. But But you know what? After weeks of harassment, threats, and rudeness, we decided we were done being nice. We hired a contractor to build a fence, and we specifically told him we wanted it to be visible. Not a nice decorative fence, not something that would blend into the landscape. We wanted something that would make it very clear where the property line was. So we're putting up a 6-foot-tall wooden fence, painted bright white right on that survey line. It's going to be obvious. It's going to be permanent. And Derek is going to see it every single day. We started construction last week. Derek came over the first day and tried to convince us not to do it. Said it would ruin the aesthetic of the area. Said it was petty. I said, Derek, you threatened to tow my vehicles for being 6 inches over a line that didn't even exist. You called me a trespasser on my own property. You harassed my family for weeks. And now you want to talk about being petty? He didn't have an answer for that. The fence is almost done now. And it looks great. Well, great to us. Derek probably hates it. But that's not really my problem anymore. Here's what I learned from this whole experience. First, know your boundaries. Literally. If you're going to make a big deal about property lines, make sure you actually know where they are. Derek could have avoided all of this if he'd just paid for a survey before opening his mouth. Second, don't threaten people over small stuff. Even if Derek had been right about the property line, threatening to tow vehicles over 6 inches is ridiculous. A simple conversation could have solved everything. Instead, he made an enemy out of a neighbor who'd lived there peacefully for 8 years. Third, sometimes being petty is justified. We could have let this go. Could have been the bigger people. But you know what? Derek deserved to lose those 20 feet. He was arrogant, aggressive, and wrong. And now he gets to live with the consequences. We still see Derek occasionally. He doesn't wave. Doesn't say hello. Just pretends we don't exist. Which is fine by us. Our other neighbors think the whole thing is hilarious. One of them told me that Derek tried to complain to them about us and they just laughed and said he should have been more careful. So that's the story of how our new neighbor threatened to tow our car over a few inches and ended up losing 20 feet of his property because of it. If you're dealing with a difficult neighbor, document everything, know your rights, and don't be afraid to stand your ground. Especially if you're in the right. And if you're planning to buy property and complain about boundaries, maybe invest in a survey first. It might save you from looking like a complete fool. Thanks for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes karma comes with a measuring tape.